listeners, my name is Dawn Hughes, and I'm the coordinator for Booktrib's Book Club program. I'm here today with author Shepherd Siegel, who has an amazing coffee mug, to talk about his book, Tricking Power into Performing Acts of Love, an examination of how tricksters through history have changed the world, which I think is probably a simple definition of the depth of this amazing book. Tricking Power into Performing Acts of Love is one of the selections available in Booktrib's Book Club program for March. Whew, that's a mouthful. Thanks for taking time to talk to us today, Shepherd.
Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to talk to you about your book. I know we have to dive right in because we only have a few minutes, but no spoilers. What can you share about your book that we wouldn't find on the jacket cover?
Well, actually, the jacket cover itself depicts the raven tail of the indigenous people of the Pacific Northwest, where I live. And while I don't delve into that in the book, it's an amazing story of tricking power, the power represented by the chief, into performing acts of love, which is giving light and the sun to the world. And the raven tricks the chief when the world was dark into giving up the sun. Also, there's a chapter early in the book on the most famous person to have never become famous. And his name was Lord Richard Buckley. And any comedian worth their salt has heard of Lord Richard Buckley, but not many more than that. He was good friends with Al Capone, the gangster. He was good friends with Frank Sinatra. Ed Sullivan, if your folks remember Ed Sullivan, he was on the Ed Sullivan Show 11 times. He made the very first comedy record. And of course it didn't sell because there was no such thing as a record store with a section where you could put the comedy records. And that's kind of the story of his life. When I talk about tricksters, I use capital T to represent fictional characters and demigods and cartoon characters. When I talk about human beings, I use a lowercase t. But the human being who comes the closest to that demigod status was Lord Richard Buckley, and he gets a whole chapter in the book.
That is cool. What inspired the book? Like what were you, what was the inspiration for writing this particular topic?
Oh, golly. I've always been fascinated by humor and laughter. I've always been in wanting society and the world to be a better place. And I always felt that that we did it too much through conflict. And the thing about the trickster, I've kind of been around a while. And one of the things that inspired me in the Vietnam War era was that the protesters often included theater and comedy and satire in what they did. But our politics today is so serious and so threatening to people that we've lost our ability to not take things too seriously. And one thing led to another. So I've been fascinated by the playfulness of little children and animals. And that's when we are most like other animals. And so I wrote an entire book based on just playfulness. But in my research, I eventually stumbled into the mythology of the trickster. So the basic premise of the book is any grown-up who has retained the ability to be playful as they were when they were a very small child will consciously or unconsciously engage with the trickster. And now we're in the area of Jungian archetypes and so forth.
Right. Huh. Fascinating. I'm excited to read this book. Obviously, you have me hooked, but from a book club perspective, why do you think this book would make such a great book club selection?
Right. And I at this moment, I hope the book has a lifespan beyond the current moment. But in this current moment, there is this infatuation with the warrior. If I'd written a book about all the great generals through history and the battles they fought and the wars they won, the audience, the book clubs, everyone, the readers would know exactly what I was talking about. When I say I want to talk about the trickster and politics and culture, not to be confused with the con man, that's a very different thing, because a trickster has no agenda beyond getting a laugh and having fun, but it opens up a portal to where we can imagine a better world. And people are so unfamiliar with the trickster. The very word makes some people, close up. But in fact, it's an archetype and a personality type that warrants our exploration.
Agree. Yes.
Yeah, in fact, and so it's not about comedy, but I use comedians a lot. And there's this movie called Annette. People can watch it on Amazon Prime by this very quirky band called Sparks. And they wrote an opera, and Adam Driver stars in it. And it's an opera. So he's on stage doing his comedy routine. And the audience is going, "Why did you become a comedian? Why did you become a comedian?" And he answers, "Why? I'll tell you why. To disarm people, make them laugh. It's the only way I know how to tell the truth without getting killed."
Wow, that's powerful.
And I think a lot of comedians today are doing that. They're on that exact same mission.
Yes.
To really, we're laughing because there's a truth there that's not obvious.
Yeah. Huh. Tricky landmines to navigate, for sure. Yeah.
Agreed. You can't take it too seriously, though.
That mug gets me every time. I think I need to find it on Amazon or something.
Oh boy, this came out of a rummage sale somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, so I need to veer off your book for a second and ask you, we're still building our to be read piles for 2024. What book should I have on my list? What's the best book you've read in the last year and why? Fiction, non-
It's one I'm even still reading, and I am just immediately fell in love with it. It's called Cosmic Scholar, and it's written by a biographer named John Swede, and it's about Harry Smith, another oddball loner. And I read it because he's the guy who invented the mixtape. And in the 1950s, he assembled records from the 1920s and 30s. And it was published and eventually owned by the Smithsonian Institute. And it's called the American Anthology of American Folk Music. Now, he never became that famous, but he changed the course of popular music. In the 60s, a lot of the rock and roll bands that had a sense of history, and certainly a lot of the folk singers gobbled this anthology up. It was 6 LPs. And it turns out he's done all kinds of things. When he was 15 years old, he became a self-taught anthropologist and did pioneering work with the Lomi tribe, again, in the Pacific Northwest, which I hadn't known till I started reading the book. And he recorded the traditions and the rituals of these native tribes before they would go away, and even studied their languages. He was amazing. It turns out he was an assistant to one of my most important books called, wait for it, The Trickster, by Paul Radin, an anthropologist who wrote it in 1955. Turns out Harry Smith is the name of the guy, that Harry Smith was his assistant. But your book club wants to read it because he's such an odd yet influential character.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. Okay, I know that I have to wrap this up, but I feel like you and I could probably talk all day. And I mean that sincerely, but I do have to wrap this up. So I just want to thank you again for your time and wish you luck with this release. I hope our book clubs pick it up. I hope you get readers from all over the world. And I definitely will read it and get back to you when I do.
Oh, I think that's so exciting. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you. So for more information about Shepherd's book, which I know you all want to read now, please check out the book club page on the booktrib.com website.